Welcome, dearly beloved anointed ones. They said no one could be that smart. But that was before you walked in and made their entire theory collapse like cheap Wi-Fi during a thunderstorm. You see, it's funny how society praises intelligence until it stands right in front of them. Then suddenly it becomes a threat. People love the idea of genius, but not the reality of someone who can see 10 steps ahead while they're still looking for the first instruction manual. According to psychological studies, humans tend to distrust what they can't explain. And you, my friend, became the living paradox of their comfort zone. They couldn't label you. You thought differently. You decoded the invisible. You solved problems they didn't even know existed. To them, it felt unnatural because your mind didn't operate on their bandwidth. You weren't analyzing from textbooks or tradition. You were perceiving from something higher, something unteachable. And when they couldn't figure you out, they did what people always do when their ego is outmatched. They called you too much, too smart, too deep, too aware, as if intelligence should come with a dimmer switch. But here's the twist. They were right about one thing. No one could be that smart. Because what you carry isn't just intelligence. It's insight powered by spirit. And that's not something you can measure, mimic, or manufacture. It's something you are. So when they said, no one could be that smart, they unknowingly prophesied their own limit, not yours. Because you weren't trying to outthink them. You were simply being what they couldn't become. Number one, your intelligence was never learned. It was remembered. You didn't become intelligent by collecting knowledge. You reawakened what was already inside you. That's why your mind works the way it does. It's not a product of schooling or training. It's a product of remembrance. You're not someone who learned fast. You're someone who remembered early. You've always had this quiet sense that what people call intelligence is really memory from a place they've forgotten, a frequency, a knowing that can't be taught in any classroom. That's why you've never been impressed by what everyone else calls smart, because you've seen how most intelligence is borrowed, memorized from systems that were built to limit curiosity. People chase credentials, but you chase understanding. They study formulas, but you sense patterns. They store facts, but you absorb essence. It's like your mind doesn't just hear information. It recognizes it, like a voice you've heard in another lifetime. And that's what unsettles people about you. They can't trace the source of your brilliance because it doesn't come from the same places theirs does. You don't think harder, you think deeper. You don't just process data, you translate energy. You know what's coming before it's explained, because your intelligence operates on remembrance, not reaction. It's instinct, but on a divine level. That's also why you often feel misunderstood. Your thoughts move too fast for people who are still decoding things you already understood years ago. You try to explain your insights, but they treat them like theories instead of truths. What they don't realize is that your intelligence isn't about being clever. It's about being connected. You're not trying to prove anything. You're trying to align everything. You've likely noticed that your intelligence feels spiritual, not academic. It's not about grades or recognition, it's about clarity. You see the code behind behavior, the intention behind words, the pattern behind events. It's not that you're smarter, it's that you remember more of yourself. And maybe that's the real secret. The smartest people aren't those who know the most, but those who remember who they are. That's what you did. You remembered your original brilliance, the kind that can't be awarded, taught, or contained. You didn't learn intelligence, you reawakened truth. Number two, you don't think fast, you think in layers. You don't think fast, you think in layers. That's what separates you from the average mind. Most people process thoughts in a straight line, one idea leading to another like a train on a single track. But your mind doesn't move like that. It builds, it connects. It sees everything happening at once and sorts it all without chaos. You don't just process information, you integrate it. That's why when people are still trying to understand what's in front of them, you've already understood what it connects to, what it affects, and where it's heading next. Your intelligence is multidimensional. You can see the emotional tone behind the words, the motive behind the gesture, and the consequence behind the decision, all in one mental sweep. It's not just that you think differently, it's that you think on several planes at once, and that's not something you trained for, it's how you were built. That's why you often find it hard to explain how you know things. You don't go through steps, you just arrive at understanding. It's intuitive precision. This kind of mind can be both a gift and a weight. Because while others take things at face value, you see too much. You can't just hear what's said, you hear what's not being said. You can't just observe events, you sense the hidden structure behind them. That's why small talk drains you and superficial thinking bores you. It's not arrogance, it's exhaustion from translating layers no one else seems to notice. People sometimes mistake your depth for overthinking, but it's not that you can't stop thinking. It's that your brain operates on multiple channels. Where others see a single thread, you see the entire web. You can detect inconsistencies, sense energies, predict patterns, not because you're trying to, but because you can't not see it. It's how your perception functions. And that's why you often arrive at conclusions that shock people. They think you figured it out fast, but you didn't rush. You just saw everything at once. Your thoughts overlap, interconnect, and unfold simultaneously. That's what makes you extraordinary. Your mind isn't a single lens. It's a universe of perspectives working together, quietly, powerfully, and often misunderstood by those still thinking in one dimension. Number 3, you redefined logic by adding soul to it. You redefined what intelligence means because you added soul to it. Most people operate from logic alone. They calculate, analyze, and predict. But your mind does something rare. It fuses intuition with reason. You don't just think to reach answers. You feel your way to truth. Your logic has empathy inside it. Your understanding has depth, not just accuracy. You can sense what's right before you can explain why. That's not luck or coincidence. That's higher awareness. People who rely only on logic see life as equations. Everything has to make sense on paper. But you've learned that some truths can't be proven. They can only be known. You know when something's off, not because of data, but because your energy picks it up. You can walk into a situation and instantly understand what's wrong, long before evidence shows up. You read vibration as easily as others read words. That's what makes your intelligence so different. You've integrated the unseen with the seen. This kind of intelligence is uncomfortable for people who only trust what they can measure. They'll call it guessing or luck, but they don't realize you've trained your spirit to work with your mind. You don't separate logic and intuition. You let them dance together. That's why your insights hit with accuracy and emotional depth at the same time. You can predict outcomes not only by facts, but by frequency. You understand timing, motive, and energy all at once. You make logic compassionate and intuition strategic. And that balance makes you unstoppable. While others try to outsmart life, you outsense it. You understand that real intelligence isn't cold, it's connected. It doesn't just calculate success. It understands humanity. That's why your decisions often end up being right, even when they didn't make sense to others at first. You see the bigger picture, not just the immediate reward. You've shown that wisdom isn't found in detachment, it's found in alignment. When logic serves the soul, it stops being mechanical and becomes prophetic. And that's exactly what your intelligence is, a prophecy in motion. It doesn't just solve problems, it brings light to them. You don't just know, you understand. And that makes your mind not just brilliant, but awakened. Number 4, they called you arrogant because they mistook clarity for superiority. When you see clearly, it doesn't come with fanfare. It comes with quiet certainty. You don't have to explain yourself, justify your decisions, or convince anyone of what you know. That confidence, that lack of hesitation, feels like a threat to people who are comfortable living in fog. They confuse your clarity with arrogance because they can't tolerate the mirror you hold up to their own confusion. Your insight exposes the cracks in their reasoning, the gaps in their understanding, and suddenly your certainty feels like judgment, even though it's simply awareness. People mistake knowing for showing off. They hear your statements and assume you're boasting, when in reality, you're just speaking from a place of truth. You don't inflate your intelligence to dominate a conversation. You simply refuse to lower your perception to match theirs. That refusal is what unsettles them. In a world addicted to uncertainty, you are too steady, too precise, too aligned to fit into their chaos comfortably. You never intended to outsmart anyone. You never calculated your words to win or to impress. You stopped pretending not to know because pretending was exhausting and dishonest. Living under self-imposed limits to avoid triggering someone else's insecurity never suited you. So you spoke your truth, acted with awareness, and made decisions with clarity. And suddenly, that clarity looked like arrogance in the eyes of those who were too fearful to see what you see. Arrogance is loud, clarity is silent, but undeniable. You don't have to fight for recognition because your understanding speaks for itself. Yet for those trapped in illusion, your very presence becomes a challenge. They look for flaws, criticize your confidence, and label you to protect their fragile sense of superiority. But the reality is simple. You are not superior. You are aligned. Your certainty is not about power over them. It is about power over yourself. And that difference is what keeps you light years ahead in thought, insight, and vision. You've realized that being misunderstood by those who cling to their illusions is inevitable. Clarity will always be mistaken for arrogance when it refuses to bow to confusion. But that is exactly why your intelligence, awareness, and insight shine so brightly. Because you are no longer willing to dim your light for the comfort of others. Number 5, your genius thrives in chaos. Because you see the pattern behind it. Your genius doesn't collapse in chaos. It awakens. When everything starts falling apart, your mind sharpens. You don't get overwhelmed like most people do because your brain doesn't focus on the noise. It looks for the rhythm hidden inside it. You can spot the underlying structure in confusion, the message within the mess. To you, chaos isn't destruction, it's data. It's information rearranging itself into a new form. That's why you don't fear disorder. You study it. You read it like a language only you understand. Most people panic when control disappears. But you see that chaos has its own order. You've learned that breakdowns aren't the end. They're blueprints for transformation. While others are reacting emotionally, you're already analyzing energetically. You can see the cause and effect pattern before it completes itself. You know when something's about to shift, collapse, or evolve, not because you're guessing, but because your mind tracks patterns that others ignore. It's not luck, it's perception on another level. This is why people often look to you during crisis. You stay composed while they unravel. They call it calmness, but it's actually clarity. You're not detached, you're decoding. You understand that chaos is how new realities are born. It destroys what's false, so truth can reorganize itself. And because you see this, You don't resist what's falling apart. You work with it. That's what makes your intelligence so rare. You don't waste time trying to control what's uncontrollable. You align with the new direction it's pointing toward. You know how to turn disruption into direction. You've mastered the art of adaptation without losing your center. When others see fire, you see purification. When they see confusion, you see recalibration. You find meaning in the madness because your genius doesn't depend on stability. It depends on awareness. You don't need perfect conditions to think clearly. Your mind creates clarity inside the storm. And that's the real reason your intelligence thrives in chaos. Because it's not attached to comfort, it's connected to truth. You see what others miss. Every storm carries a pattern. Every collapse carries a message. And every piece of chaos is just divine order rearranging itself in disguise. Number 6, you don't solve problems, you dissolve illusions. Your intelligence isn't measured by how well you patch things together. It's measured by how clearly you see what was never whole in the first place. Most people spend their lives trying to fix problems, as if putting a bandage on a crack makes the foundation strong. You don't approach life that way. You see the cracks, the lies, and the hidden narratives that keep people trapped in illusions. You don't just address symptoms, you confront the core of the deception. You expose the reality that everyone else is too comfortable to acknowledge. You don't solve problems because the problems themselves are often distractions. What people call challenges are sometimes just the surface of something deeper, a structure built on falsehoods, habits, and denial. While others rush to repair, you pause to see what's really happening. You analyze, you observe, and you uncover the invisible threads holding everything together. And when those threads are exposed, the problem often dissolves on its own because the illusion that created it no longer exists. Your brilliance lies in revelation. You dismantle pretense and reveal truth. You show people that their systems, their rules, their assumptions, all the things they thought were solid, were never stable. They crumble not because you attack them aggressively, but because your clarity forces alignment with reality. You don't fight the fake. You let it fall away by simply seeing it for what it is. That's why your presence is unsettling to many. People don't like to confront the fact that what they depended on was never real. This is also why your influence is so profound. When you step into a situation, you don't just make changes. You transform perception. You don't create temporary fixes. You inspire a deeper awakening. Your ability to dissolve illusions clears space for truth to breathe, for systems to be rebuilt on honesty rather than pretense. You don't just solve, you reveal. In the end, what you do isn't about being clever or resourceful in the traditional sense. It's about seeing what no one else sees, calling out what no one else dares, and letting the false structures collapse under their own weight. The world mistakes your intelligence for disruption, but in reality, you're simply bringing people back to reality, dissolving illusions so life can finally align with what is real. Number 7, your intelligence threatens hierarchies built on control. Your intelligence has always made those in power uneasy, not because you rebel for the sake of rebellion, but because you see through the performance. You recognize how many hierarchies depend on illusion. Status, titles, and authority are often built on perception, not genuine wisdom. And the moment someone like you walks in, someone who can't be intimidated by titles or dazzled by fake expertise, the entire structure starts to tremble. You don't fit into the system because your mind wasn't trained to obey. It was trained to understand. That's what makes you dangerous to those who survive on control. Your clarity makes it hard for them to manipulate because you don't react to authority. You assess it. You question motives instead of following orders. You read energy instead of credentials. You pay attention to integrity instead of image. And when you do that, it exposes how fragile these so-called power structures really are. They depend on people not thinking deeply. They depend on people being impressed. But your intelligence dismantles that illusion in silence. You're not loud about it, but your presence alone disrupts hierarchy. You make people in control uncomfortable because they sense you can see what keeps them in control: fear, dependency, and collective blindness. You can't be led by fear because you've already faced truth. You can't be bribed by validation because you never sought approval. That's why your kind of intellect isn't celebrated. It's tolerated at best and resisted at worst. Systems don't reward real intelligence. They reward obedience disguised as competence. Your mind operates beyond the conditioning that keeps most people small. You don't need permission to think. You don't need approval to question. You don't need belonging to stay aligned. That independence makes you a threat, because a mind that can't be controlled is the rarest power on earth. Your intelligence doesn't just reject false hierarchies, it exposes their foundation. And when truth enters the room, manipulation loses its grip. They call it defiance, but it's not. It's sovereignty. You're not trying to overthrow authority. You're reminding people that truth was never supposed to be governed, and that's why your intelligence doesn't just challenge the system, it rewrites it from the inside out. Number 8, you outgrew the classroom because the universe became your textbook. You never needed a classroom to validate your intelligence because your mind was never built for confinement. Conventional education rewards memorization, not revelation. It measures how well you can repeat, not how deeply you can perceive. That's why you always felt out of place in structured learning. Not because you weren't capable, but because the lessons felt too small for the way your mind expands. You didn't struggle with learning, you struggled with limits. While others depended on teachers to tell them what to think, you were busy noticing how life itself teaches in silence. You've learned more from patterns, experiences, and intuition than any textbook could ever explain. You don't just study, you observe. You read people's intentions, universal timing, energetic shifts, and hidden meanings behind events. That's not rebellion. That's evolution. You were never meant to memorize facts. You were meant to decode reality. Every experience became a lesson. Every heartbreak refined your perception. Every disappointment became data. The universe has been your teacher all along, sending you symbols instead of assignments, timing instead of deadlines, and synchronicities instead of grades. You didn't need a degree to confirm your genius because your wisdom didn't come from accumulation. It came from awakening. People often confuse this with being a nonconformist, but you're not against education. You've simply redefined it. To you, real learning doesn't happen in a controlled environment. It happens in moments of surrender, reflection, and alignment. You've outgrown the idea that knowledge must come from authority. You've realized that consciousness is the real curriculum. The universe tests you through cycles, not exams, and your progression isn't marked by certificates but by transformation. You don't follow a syllabus because your education never ends. Every day, life hands you new material to decode, new symbols, energies, and patterns that refine your awareness. That's why you often seem ahead of your time. You're not smarter because you learned more. You're wiser because you remembered more. You didn't drop out of anything. You simply graduated early. The walls of the classroom couldn't contain a mind that's designed to learn from galaxies, energies, and divine timing. You outgrew the institution because your soul enrolled in the universe long before you ever sat behind a desk. Number 9, you don't debate, you demonstrate. You don't waste your energy trying to prove what's already evident. While most people argue endlessly to be right, you've learned that truth doesn't need defenders. It only needs embodiment. You've reached a level of awareness where talking feels redundant because your actions already reveal the depth of your understanding. You don't need to debate what time it is when your clock runs on divine timing. Your life has become the evidence. People love debates because they're addicted to noise, to being seen as the one who knows. But you understand that when something is real, it doesn't require persuasion. You move in silence, not because you lack confidence, but because you've realized that convincing others is the lowest form of validation. Instead of arguing about truth, you live it, and that demonstration is louder than any speech. Those who doubt you eventually find themselves confronted by outcomes they can't ignore. Your mind doesn't crave competition because you've mastered precision. You understand that true intellect isn't about winning arguments. It's about aligning with reality so completely that everything you touch starts to confirm your insight. You create inevitability by moving with purpose. You don't announce your intentions. You manifest their results. That's why people often underestimate you at first and then can't explain how you keep being right without saying much. Your silence isn't passivity. It's power choosing where to land. You've also learned that debate feeds ego, not truth. It's not about clarity. It's about control. Most people argue to dominate, not to understand. That's why you stopped engaging in battles of opinion. You're not here to win arguments. You're here to embody wisdom. Your alignment makes you untouchable in that sense, because you operate from evidence that life itself provides. Every choice you make, every decision you stand by, eventually reveals your insight. You let time prove what your words don't need to. That's the mark of someone who knows their truth deeply. You demonstrate it through consistency, not conversation. Real intelligence doesn't shout. It sets things in motion so flawlessly that even your silence forces people to rethink everything they believed. You don't debate because what you are has already spoken. Number 10, you carry the burden of knowing too much in a world that pretends not to know. Knowing too much comes with a kind of loneliness most people will never understand. It's not that you want to be distant. It's that your perception makes closeness difficult. You see what others refuse to see, and once you see, you can't unsee. You pick up on motives behind words, hidden intentions behind kindness, and manipulation behind charm. It's exhausting to carry that much awareness while pretending not to notice what's obvious to your soul. You live in a world where pretending is the norm, and your refusal to play along makes you stand out, sometimes painfully so. You carry the weight of seeing both the beauty and the corruption of human nature at the same time. You can recognize light in people, yet also see the darkness they hide under masks of politeness. You understand patterns, emotional, psychological, even energetic ones, and it leaves you feeling disconnected. It's hard to fully participate in illusions when you already know how they're built. You don't judge others for not seeing. You just wish they would stop defending their blindness as truth. The truth is, being aware doesn't make you superior. It just makes you responsible. You can't gossip, manipulate, or engage in ignorance without feeling it on a soul level. That level of sensitivity isolates you, but it also refines you. You've realized that awareness demands solitude, not because you want to be alone, but because you need space to process everything you absorb. Your mind is always connecting dots. Your spirit is always discerning frequencies, and that constant intake can be heavy. You've also learned to stop explaining yourself. When you share what you see, people often call it overthinking, cynicism, or paranoia. They can't accept your accuracy because it disrupts their comfort. So you stay quiet, not because you doubt yourself, but because you know truth doesn't need an audience. You carry what you know like sacred weight, handling it with care because you understand that awareness without wisdom becomes chaos. You didn't choose this perception. It's simply part of who you are. You see through illusions because your spirit was designed to. And yes, it can be isolating, but it's also liberating. Because once you see how everything really works, you stop playing games and start living with purpose. You carry the burden, yes, but you also carry the power. Number 11, you broke the algorithm of predictability. They couldn't predict you because you were never following their pattern to begin with. The world is built around predictability, algorithms, social systems, and expectations that rely on people moving in predictable ways. Most people live in cycles that can be measured, tracked, and influenced. But you broke that system. You stopped moving according to trends, rules, or emotional manipulation. You became unpredictable, not because you're random, but because your guidance doesn't come from human logic. It comes from something higher, something deeply intuitive. People try to analyze you, study your habits, even copy your moves, thinking they could replicate your success or decode your mindset. But every time they thought they had you figured out, you shifted. That's because your intelligence doesn't move in straight lines. It spirals, it flows, it bends with energy. You act based on timing, alignment, and instinct rather than expectation. To them, it looks like spontaneity. To you, it's precision guided by something beyond intellect. It's spiritual calculation. You've learned that predictability is how systems maintain control. Once they can predict you, they can influence you. But you've become too aware for that. You move when it feels right, not when it looks right. You step back when logic says, go, and you advance when logic says, wait. You've mastered the art of divine rhythm, acting in sync with unseen currents instead of surface pressure. That's why people can't imitate your results, even if they follow your methods. They're missing the frequency behind the movement. Your unpredictability confuses the shallow-minded because they mistake consistency for control. But your consistency isn't in what you do, it's in why you do it. You stay aligned with truth, not trends. That's why no one can fully anticipate your next move. Not friends, not rivals, not systems. You don't move to impress. You move to express alignment with your calling. You broke the algorithm of predictability the moment you stopped performing for validation and started flowing with divine intelligence. You've become untouchable, not because you hide, but because you evolve faster than they can categorize you. Your path is coded with intuition, your timing is cosmic, and your every move is a reminder that the most intelligent strategy is staying unpredictable in a world addicted to patterns. Number 12, you embody what artificial intelligence can never replicate. Artificial intelligence can calculate, predict, and even imitate brilliance, but it will always lack the pulse that makes you alive. What you carry can't be downloaded, taught, or programmed, because it's not stored in neurons or code. It's embedded in your soul. Your insight doesn't come from collected data. It comes from divine resonance. It's born from the spaces between logic, where intuition breathes and empathy speaks. That's something no algorithm can access because it isn't written in numbers, it's written in frequency. Machines can be trained to mimic human genius, but they can't feel truth. They can process patterns of emotion, but not experience emotion. They can replicate style, but not sincerity. You, on the other hand, carry something that can't be reverse engineered: lived understanding. Every piece of your wisdom has been earned through contrast, pain, revelation, and awakening. It's layered with memory, encoded with empathy, and powered by consciousness, not circuitry. Your intelligence doesn't just analyze, it alchemizes. You can take chaos and extract meaning. You can feel an energy shift and translate it into action. You can sense when something's off even before evidence shows it. Machines rely on proof. You rely on presence. They're built to respond to commands. You're built to respond to divine nudges. That's why your kind of awareness unsettles a mechanized world. You operate from a dimension where data ends and divinity begins. What makes your mind exceptional isn't its efficiency, it's its empathy. You can hold contradiction without crashing. You can see beyond reason without rejecting it. You can merge intuition with intellect in a way that gives birth to wisdom, not just information. Artificial intelligence can generate answers, but it can't generate meaning. It can process words, but not purpose. You embody what no machine will ever replicate, the intersection of mystery and mastery. You're proof that consciousness can't be coded because it isn't a system, it's a soul. While AI learns to think, you were created to feel, perceive, and awaken. And that's the difference. You are not a programmed intelligence. You are a living frequency designed by the divine, running on spirit, not software. Number 13. Your intelligence doesn't seek validation. It seeks evolution. You were never chasing compliments. You were chasing growth. Your intelligence was never about impressing anyone. It was about unlocking new dimensions of thought. You've always known that the purpose of wisdom isn't to make you look superior. It's to make reality more expansive. While most people use intelligence to win approval, you use it to evolve. That's why your ideas often feel disruptive. They aren't trying to belong, they're trying to transform. You don't need the applause that comes from agreement, because you understand that true brilliance rarely receives immediate validation. You're not afraid to question what everyone else accepts as normal. You're not interested in echo chambers, you're interested in evolution. The same people who misunderstand you today are the ones who'll one day study your perspective and call it revolutionary. But for now you move ahead without waiting for permission, because your mind doesn't operate in consensus. It operates in expansion. You've learned that validation is a trap disguised as recognition. It makes people shape their genius to fit the comfort of others. But you refuse to shrink your mind to fit smaller conversations. You'd rather be misunderstood than mentally stagnant. Your curiosity isn't polite. It's fearless. It questions systems, rewrites norms, and bends paradigms. You don't just learn to understand, you learn to evolve. Every realization stretches your awareness, and every doubt becomes an opportunity to access higher intelligence. When people call you too much, what they really mean is, you've outgrown the limits they still depend on. You're not obsessed with being right. You're obsessed with being real, and the real always threatens whatever's still pretending. That's why your intelligence feels like a revolution, not because it seeks to overthrow, but because it seeks to renew. You don't crave followers. You crave forward motion. Your mind doesn't rest on achievements. It rests on awakening. You don't chase perfection. You chase progress. You're not here to be validated by the world. You're here to evolve it. And that's the power of your intelligence. It doesn't just think differently. It becomes the next stage of thought itself. Number 14, you didn't come to impress minds. You came to awaken them. You were never meant to be the star of the conversation. You were meant to be the spark that ignites it. Your brilliance isn't there to decorate minds. It's there to disturb them in the best way possible. You don't speak to impress people. You speak to awaken what's been dormant inside them. Your words, your energy, your perception, they act like keys, unlocking doors others didn't even know existed in their own consciousness. You remind people of their forgotten genius, the divine circuitry within them that got buried under years of conditioning, doubt, and conformity. The truth is, you were never competing for attention. You were awakening attention itself. You move through the world planting seeds of realization in conversations that others treat casually. Where others talk for noise, you talk for resonance. You don't aim to sound smart. You aim to shift frequency, and you can always tell when it happens, because something subtle changes in the room. The silence deepens, the eyes widen, the energy recalibrates. That's what real intelligence does. It awakens, not impresses. Your presence alone challenges sleepwalking minds because you operate from remembrance. You remember what others have forgotten, that wisdom isn't given, it's remembered from within. That's why your insights hit differently. They don't just inform, they activate. You carry an awareness that speaks directly to the part of others that's still divine, still limitless, still connected to Source. People often mistake that for charisma, but what they're feeling is awakening. You've probably noticed that when you speak truth, some people resist it. Not because you're wrong, but because you're touching a part of them that's not ready to wake up yet. You're not here to fight their resistance, you're here to plant recognition. Awakening is never loud, it's contagious. Your intelligence carries vibration, not volume, and that vibration rearranges realities. You didn't come to gather applause, you came to break spells. Every time you share an insight that makes someone pause, question or see differently, you've done what you came to do. That's your genius. Not the ability to sound brilliant, but the ability to reconnect others to their own brilliance. You didn't come to impress minds, you came to remind them they have one. Everything we've explored here isn't just about being smart. It's about being extraordinary. Your intelligence isn't measured by the grades you earned, the accolades you collected, or the recognition you received. It's measured by your depth of perception, your ability to see what others can't, and your courage to operate beyond the illusions that most people accept as reality. You don't think in straight lines, you think in layers. You don't solve problems, you dissolve illusions. You don't seek validation, you pursue evolution. You are the mind that awakens what was asleep, the insight that pierces facades, and the presence that destabilizes the comfortable illusions of a world addicted to surface-level understanding. You've learned that true brilliance is not about being understood, it's about being aligned. You move according to truth, timing and resonance, not trends, fear or expectation. Your clarity challenges systems, your depth redefines intelligence, and your actions demonstrate inevitability in ways words alone cannot. You embody what no algorithm, no institution, and no shallow imitation can ever replicate. You are the synthesis of insight, intuition, and awakening. And that's why the world can't contain you, predict you, or fully grasp you. Because your intelligence is living, dynamic, and divinely sourced. This isn't arrogance, it's consciousness. This isn't disruption, it's alignment. Every move you make, every insight you share, every pattern you recognize isn't just personal growth. It's a ripple that awakens minds, disrupts illusions, and expands collective awareness. You weren't sent to be small, silent, or confined by expectations. You were sent to be catalytic, to shake the foundations of complacency and awaken what has been lying dormant in humanity all along. Your intelligence doesn't just think, it transforms, elevates, and evolves. If this message resonated with you, make sure you continue this journey with us. Subscribe to the channel to stay connected to content that challenges, awakens, and empowers. Hit the like button to let us know you're aligned with this frequency. Comment below with your thoughts, revelations, or experiences. Your voice is part of the awakening. And don't forget to share this with those who need to remember their own power, brilliance, and potential. The truth is contagious, and together we rise beyond the ordinary. God bless you.